Welcome to Scoreography, a podcast about the greatest sport on ice, figure skating. I'm Wendy Buskey.
And I'm Adrian Buskey, and this time we're talking about the Cup of China competition 2023 as part of the 23-24 Grand Prix of Figure Skating series.
The Grand Prix.
Grand Prix.
I would like to also point out that an alt name for this competition, per Jackie Wong, Cup of Disaster.
He called it the Cup of Disaster?
He did.
Huh. That's a weird thing to say about this competition. I don't feel like there was...
It's more a historical reference, if you will.
Oh.
Ashley Wagner had also posted that Cup of China, in her experience, is known to be, pardon the terminology, but a bit of a shit show.
Huh. Well, you know, this competition, as I understand, has not had international competitors at it since like 2019, because when the pandemic lockdown happened, and a lot of the events had to be kind of confined to their nations as people couldn't really travel long distance. China got really cut off. And so they had the event, but they only had
Chinese participants.
Right. Yeah. So I think this is the first time that they've had people back in a long time. And I think last year's MK Wilson Trophy was kind of a replacement for this in the Grand Prix. So I don't know that history of it.
And to be fair, neither do I. I was mostly just amused.
I would guess in watching this particular competition, I would imagine that some of that is reflected by the fact that for a lot of the competitors, it is a really, really long flight to get to China. It's like 20 hours for a lot of them. And a lot of them are jumping from one Grand Prix event to the next, like say like an Adam Siao Him Fa, who went directly from winning Skate France to going to Cup of China, a week later. And for a lot of them, they were talking about the fact that they were tired, that they were jet lagged. Jet lag was a big topic of conversation for a lot of the competitors.
Yeah, I mean, there was quite a few people there that said how brutal it had been. And plus, we're also on the second half of the Grand Prix. So a good portion of the people there, with very few exceptions, have competed at some other Grand Prix competition, unlike Shoma Uno, who debuted here. So I think there's also just a level of exhaustion starting to hit whenever you've been traveling. This is your second competition in the season, and it's so close together because all of these, it feels like we've been going for a while. This is the fourth of 6, but it's just every weekend. So if you think about it, even Deanna Stellato-Dudek and Maxime Deschamps won Skate Canada. And that feels like a while ago. It was 2 weeks ago. So they had to compete, have this huge high from their incredible competition there, and then go back home, have some downtime a little bit, and then fly to China for their next big competition. I was listening to the run through the podcast that Adam Rapon and Ashley Wagner and Sarah Hughes do together. And they were
journalist Sarah Hughes, not
Olympic gold medalist.
Yeah.
Sarah Hughes, which is a gag I love on their show. They were talking about the fact that, the 2-week gap is almost more brutal than the back-to-back that Adam Siao Him Fa had. You have just enough time to sort of get back in your habit for like a day or two, and then bam, you're out the door again.
If you've ever been a business traveler, and there was a period of time where I was a business traveler, you recognize quickly that one of the things that sucks the most is to pack, fly somewhere, do the thing, get home, unpack, and then repack 2 days later.
Well, it's terrible.
When you're just living out of a suitcase, like it can be fun, but it can also just really exhaust you. And when you add on to that elite level athletic competition, that is really, really exhausting. And the preparation and the training and the conditioning for is just so much work.
It's a lot, but let's get into it and talk through what I don't actually think was a total disaster by any stretch.
No, I thought this was actually a kind of an interestingly concise show because there weren't as many competitors in this competition. A lot of the individual disciplines were short 1 to 3 teams or individuals. I just remember like pulling up the videos for them and being like, oh, it's an hour and a half. That's great. Now I can skip through a few things and go through it pretty fast because we were, of course, we were not watching them at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was.
No, I couldn't do that. But let's start with the women because I think that was a really interesting competition. You had a surprise top 2, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. So The women's competition, I think, is the most freewheeling like upset of the event. I mean, there's a very notable one in the men's as well, but because when you look at it, it was a pretty deep competition when you had Luna Hendricks, who's already, she's a two-time world medalist and she's already won gold on the Grand Prix this season. You have Yelim Kim, who we were just gushing about last week because I just adore her as a skater. And we were really excited to see her debut on the Grand Prix with this one. You had Canada's Madeline Skizis. You had Japan's Rika Watanabe. You had Estonia's Nina Petrokina, who just got on the podium at Skate America, which was a big deal. Really, I mean, I think most people figured that like this is probably a Luna Hendricks and then probably like a Yelim Kim. And then afterwards, it becomes a little bit of a crapshoot. But that's not how it shook out.
Not so much, because after the short, it sort of looked like it was going that way. Luna had the lead, and then we had Rinka Watanabe in second, and Hana Yoshida from Japan in third. And what do you know? It flipped, and Hana Yoshida takes the gold in a surprise upset that not only was really, really well done, and unfortunately at taking advantage of the fact that Luna Hendricks had a fairly rough free skate, but also now the fifth highest scoring women's program for the season so far in the Grand Prix. That's a big deal for her.
So we saw Hana Yoshida about 4 weeks ago at Skate America. She put on a really impressive performance there. Her short program was a little rough, and so I think she went into the free in like 8th or 9th place, something like that.
Something like that.
But she had a fantastic free skate, and it got her up into the 4th spot. So just off the podium, but still an impressive showing for her in her first, I believe, her first Grand Prix appearance. Because I think she's like fresh out of juniors.
Yeah.
When we watched that one, we noted the fact that like she just had so much joy on ice. Like she has such a very engaging personality, a really dynamic skating style. Obviously, there's room for growth. She still is a younger skater, but already there is an identity on ice. And and that free program was dynamite. She showed up here and delivered again. Like you said, she was after the short, she was in 3rd place. Mm-hmm. Behind a Rinka Watanabe performing at the level that we expect and have seen before from Rinka, which is really, really exciting. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But Hana did the thing that we've talked about numerous times, which is that you may not go in as the podium expectation, but give it your all and try to skate clean. And I know they're all trying to do that. But you try to position yourself so that if maybe somebody ahead of you that has more technical or more experience or is the favored person for that podium and they just have a bad day and they sabotage themselves, if you did the work, sometimes that means the medal goes to you. And Hana Yoshida did the work, put on a brilliant free skate and jumped herself right to the top of the podium. And clearly she did not expect that.
No, and I think it's extraordinary, and it really shows the promise of a young skater. It's her, kind of official arrival, if you will, on the senior circuit, and it's a very big deal to be 5th highest score of the season so far. That puts her in really good position going into Japanese nationals around Christmas time.
I heard that backstage, we didn't see, we see the kiss and cry, but we don't see that waiting area. At least we have not during the Grand Prix broadcast. But apparently, like, Rinka Watanabe had to, like, turn to Hana and say, hey, you won. You won. Because it had not sunk in. Hana
That's adorable.
Was watching it, not really sure. So, and of course, they're both from Japan and they're friends and stuff.
Yes,
so
and also, Rinka only lost by less than a point.
Less than a point. Let's talk about Rinka Watanabe here, because this is a skater that we've been watching for several years. She's a brilliant skater. She's had her ups and downs. She's not always consistent. She's lost a little bit of technical.
She was doing triple axels last season and isn't yet, but she says she's going to bring him back for Japanese nationals.
We hope that we'll get to see that from her, but still, like early in this season, her programs were strong, but she just wasn't quite delivering up to her level. And you could tell it was frustrating her because she just wasn't finding it on the ice all the time. Also, somewhat notably, I would say in the free program, which is a strong program, she had this just terrible outfit. I just really, really didn't like that outfit.
I know you hated her costume, and she changed it.
She
heard you.
Yes. I was so excited when she came out for the free skate and had a completely different outfit that I think fit the music better. I think it looked better on her. The other outfit just had this weird high ruffled collar that looked like it was swallowing her, and it was just all gray and kind of...
That was the problem. I didn't mind the dress overall. I just hated the neck piece thing that I'm sure was supposed to be dramatic effect, but she's a small person and it just looked like it was engulfing her face. It was weird.
She laid down 2 fantastic skates and just barely got edged out by Hana Yoshida in the free skate. So having watched Hana back at Skate America and being so impressed there, I'm really excited for her to have that podium placement. It was a disappointing showing from Luna Hendricks.
She just didn't look like her. Like, I think that was the thing that I noticed the most, is that in her short program, she still kind of had her Luna Hendricks vibe, if you will, but it was a little off and she was a bit slow. She popped her double axel at the end. She still stayed on top in the short, but then in the long, it was like any energy that she had mustered for the short program was just gone. And Luna Hendricks knows how to deliver a program. I mean, so much of her aura is sell. Like, she knows how to sell a program. And whatever that special spark is that she has was not here.
In like the press conference, she talked about the fact that I think she was jet lagged, like so many of the competitors were, and I think also maybe even skating on a bit of an injury.
I think she mentioned something about that. I did hear that.
But thing that we saw in the free skate is that it wasn't like a total disaster. She didn't fall all over the place or anything. It was more like the death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
Just lots of elements that just weren't delivered as well. She didn't have the energy. The choreography just kind of felt a little saggy, especially in the middle. It just kind of just didn't feel like it was up to snuff. The problem I have, I love Luna. She's like one of my favorite skaters. I really like her short program. I like the choreography of the long program, but I cannot stand the music. I find it really, really irritating. And when
the mix is strange.
Yeah. And when it's coupled with a lethargic performance, it goes from being this really striking high energy piece to something that just feels kind of lackluster.
Unfortunately, speaking of lackluster, as much as we adore her, Yelim Kim, it was a bit of a bummer.
Yeah. I was so hyped to see her at this show. I will choose to not feel super bummed out on it simply because Yelim herself seemed to be in a really positive place.
Yeah. And she also said she was skating on a bit of an injury.
Yeah. So definitely she does not look at the same form that she was at this time last year.
But she was also too far last year because she burnt out at Grand Prix Final. And from there on, she just never quite looked the same.
Yeah. Yelim Kim and then also the other Korean skater, Hae-in Lee, both seem to be on that like peak late trajectory. Like that seems to be what their training is all about right now. In Yelim's case, this is certainly, I mean, she landed in 6th place. She was in 8th after the short, climbed her way back to 6th. But still, yeah, just like programs that had just not quite come together. But she was not crushed by it. She seemed like very accepting of the numbers and very good emotional, like mental place, which is really helpful. This was definitely a competition where the scoring was pretty conservative. Skate Canada was like,
here's all the points.
Yeah, everything was overblown there. Like it felt like everybody's score was inflated, with the exception of a handful of people who were underscored there, and then a few people who were astronomically overscored. And then last week at Skate France, I felt like it was much more even, that pretty across the board, I didn't really have a lot of arguments with what was going on there. But here, numerous times you had people sitting in the kiss and cry and their number would come up and they would just have that face of, what, really? And whether it was just a really, really nitpicky judging panel or they were just, their expectations were different, I don't know what it was, but it seemed like a good portion of the skaters were dumped down a little bit over what we would have expected.
To be fair, I think that overall the placements all still tracked.
Like, oh, yeah, for sure.
So the numbers were a little strange, but where everyone landed felt right.
Yeah, and in 4th place, Nina Petrikina. It would have been nice to have seen her podium again to have a shot at the Grand Prix Final. I think she still put on a great performance. There was some unevenness in it, but man, I really like her programs. I
like her programs a lot. It wasn't as good as her performances at Skate America, so I am not at all surprised that she didn't make the podium, but it was a bummer because you could see that that was the thing she was shooting for. So, at least she got close, and good for her for getting that close. And to be fair, I think mathematically there's still a shot.
There might be because, I
don't think it's very likely. It's like very minimal chance.
The Grand Prix Final only has 6 slots.
Yeah.
And as yet, none of the women skaters has locked 2 golds. which is basically the guaranteed shot. Now you have a few people who are locked in, like an Isabeau Levito
and Luna Hendricks.
And our expectation is that Kaori Sakamoto will lock it at her. I think she's at Espo. So, that's a good chunk of those slots taken up. But what happens after that? Yeah, we're just going to have to see how the math goes down after the next two competitions.
I'm going to put my money on Yelim Kim and Ryan Sumiyushi taking two of those.
Those are good calls. Both of those women performed really, really well earlier on. That I'm a fan of Ryan, and I'm really excited about her performance so far this season. Yelim Kim was absolutely terrific when we saw her in Canada, but she is still a little shy on the ice. Beautiful skating, but not as much like sell as we see from some of the others. So I think that would put her at a bit of a disadvantage, but she was still technically really, really sound when we saw her. Rounding out the rest of the women, I think the other ones that are notable are in fifth place, Maddie Schizis.
I'm being honest with you. I don't remember her performance. And I feel bad because I do like Maddie. It's just I'm not that excited by her programs this year. I want to be. I desperately want to be because I think that she's got a lot going on and has a lot of desire to bring it. It's just so far I have not seen it brought.
Yeah, I agree that neither of the programs are super memorable. What was memorable for me was she was one of those people who was in the kiss and cry. She doesn't really have a poker face when you know that she's not liking. I do love
that she doesn't.
Yeah. And so she had a lot of like raised eyebrows and scrunchy face and just like, that's some shit. But not that she said that, but, it was written all over her. Yes. And then down in seventh was, one of our faves, Katerina Kurakova. Katya is a wonderful skater, but just technically is not quite hitting that level of competition.
It's technically, and also I feel like she's got so much charisma and so much energy and love of skating, and you can feel all of it. But there's technique issues, and it's the basics that I worry about. She's not super fast across the ice. She doesn't have the same like leg extensions I'm noticing a lot. And they're all things that she could get. I really want to believe that, but I just haven't seen it yet. I feel like that's the line to get her over it. She has to push past where she's been at for, 2 seasons roughly. And I feel like she's made a big step with the choreography and the music choices this season. So that's a great advancement. Now she needs to work on how do I get more power?
I had not picked up on the leg extension thing until you mentioned it while we were watching her free skate. Then that's all I could see was the fact that like she really isn't bringing her leg up very high. She's not really getting those extensions. She's not getting those points. I mean, pointing of the leg, pointing of the toe, right. And probably also the PCS.
I was going to say, like her GOE is never going to get as high as she needs it to be if she's not doing that.
Yeah. And she's reflected several times, both online and I think in the press conferences and interviews and stuff, that like she just can't figure out what to do to make the judges like her more. Because even here, again, especially her free skate, she seemed really, really pleased with, as did the crowd. But again, the numbers just didn't pan out. But I think that when you make the comparison to all of the skaters who were ahead of her, I think that it all made sense. It was all locked in the way that you would expect and want it to be based on their performances, day of. But yeah, I'm just so excited about Hana Yoshida's performance here because I think that really does set her up nicely for the ongoing career, especially with the Olympics so close.
Yeah, I think that's like she's definitely one to watch going into Milano Cortina. But I want to move on to the dance, because I'm real excited / sus, because I believe, and maybe this is a hot take, I don't know, but Marjorie Lajoie and Zachary Lagha should have won.
Absolutely.
They were freaking amazing, brought it, did maybe the best twizzles I've ever seen a dance pair do. So fast, so smooth. Whether you like the material or not, that's subjective. But my God, did they show up here?
Marjorie and Zach have been impressing us all season, but that thriller routine in the rhythm dance was brilliant.
It was phenomenal.
I was so impressed with that, particularly Marjorie is all sell, but Zach really brings that character to life there.
He is amazing in that rhythm dance.
Yes, it's so different from anything anybody else is doing this season. It's so entertaining. The musicality of it, the character work that they do in that is so good. And then you go to the free skate and they are just flowing and beautiful and lyrical, and it is gorgeous. And yes, that should have topped the podium, no question.
I feel like their long program is a poem. I think I've said that before. I will say it again, probably without thinking about it, because that's what I think of it as. There's so much beauty and artistry and subtlety, but also power and emotion. I don't have enough adjectives to use on it. It's a gorgeous piece, and they are Canada's future.
So the way this actually shook out, though, was that the top Canadian ice dance team, Piper Gillis and Paul Poirier, who won Skate Canada a couple weeks ago with great performances that still felt wildly overscored, which is what I was referencing earlier. They came in first place here. And I mean, notably in first place by like a point and change.
Yeah, because Piper had some problems on her twizzle sequence in the rhythm dance. And also they were just a little bit stiff in their rhythm dance. It didn't look like their normal level of presentation. I mean, Piper and Paul are incredible skaters. Again, brilliant. They're just brilliant. But the rhythm dance didn't feel like their usual level of skating, and it showed in their scores for sure. But their long program, I mean, it was divine. I mean, they did a gorgeous job with the Wuthering Heights program. It is unique. It has a point of view. It has a story. There's so much drama because, of course, it does, because it's Piper and Paul. But I just haven't found my way into these programs yet. And maybe that's just me. I've watched the top teams now, all of them in their programs this season. And of your top 5 or 6, theirs are the ones I'm struggling with, honestly, the most.
I mean, like Marjorie and Zach absolutely dominated the rhythm dance.
For sure.
And it showed because they were at the top of the rankings going into the free skate, which in and of itself was an upset.
Huge accomplishment.
Yeah. That flip-flopped once all the judging was done and the dust had settled for the long program. I have that feeling like the judges just scraped together 1.5 points to throw Piper and Paul's way. And that's probably uncharitable on my part. That's one of those cases where I think when you watch it from home, especially if you don't know every, little bit of the scoring handbook for these things, that you're going to watch it and go, oh, this team clearly won. Oh, they didn't. What the hell? And that's just how I felt on that one, where I was like, this was Marjorie and Zach's event. And I know they're still thrilled with silver because that's still a big deal for them.
It was a huge number for them. I mean, losing by only a point and some change is a massive step forward for them. It's now, I believe, the 5th or 6th highest score of anyone this season, any team. And it puts them ahead of Laurence Fournier-Boudre and Nikolai Sorensen in terms of that overall score this season so far. So it sets them up, if nothing else, going into Canadian Nationals in an extremely solid way, and puts them also through to the Grand Prix Final, which will be very interesting now because it will likely include 3 Canadian teams.
Last week, you made the comment that a lot of times at these competitions, there's the competition within a competition.
Yes.
Which is when you have multiple countrymen going up against each other, especially because the Grand Prix is ahead of the nationals for all of the individual countries. And so a lot of times when you have deep fields like Canada has with ice dance, there is this kind of jockeying for position leading up to their own nationals. And so
it's political.
Yeah. And so in an instance like this, particularly in ice dance, where it's a game of inches, I know I've used that phrase a lot in this season so far, you are jockeying for position in the minds of the judges, because there often has this feeling in ice dance, like a predetermination, like there's an expectation that these people are going to go in and they're going to fall in a certain way, and that you almost have to prove the judges wrong or something. Mm-hmm. It's like, and it's frustrating to watch sometimes because in all the rest of the disciplines, you feel like anything goes. Any day, the right performance can change things up. And we'll see that when we talk about the men here in a second.
Yeah.
But yeah, in ice dance, it feels like it's a little bit more codified.
It's why you don't see a lot of switching around from the rhythm dance into the long program typically in any ice dance competition, and why you kind of know going in what the placements are going to be season over season. If you're paying attention year over year, it's really fun when you do see the right team making some moves. Like, I'm really curious going into Espoo in Finland next week we have the Finnish team that we're going to see for the first time on the Grand Prix.
And they were brilliant in Challenger.
Brilliant in Challenger. And they're making moves. So just like Zach and Marjorie here, I feel like they're the teams right now. Those two teams are making the chess pieces move in alignment with them. And it's really, really cool. I'm excited to see more of them.
It was also nice to see the Americans, Caroline Green and Michael Parsons, get the bronze here.
I am very happy for them. Those programs are definitely coming along and really feeling like the two of them are starting to seem more comfortable in those programs, which is very cool. I still am real curious to go back to the competition within the competition about once we get to U.S. Nationals, their score versus the top score from Karim Ponomarenko this season. I think they are below them. And then you have the Browns, you have there's a deep, deep U.S. field of people vying for the placement on the podium with Chalk and Bates. So I could see watching Caroline's face in the kiss and cry that she's thinking about it. Like,
oh, sure.
She saw those scores and had that, I'm smiling, but I'm not really smiling.
Right. Well, and again, that's a case where I think you could tell, in particular, Caroline felt that they were underscored.
Yeah.
I'm so pleased with their replacement short program, that rhythm skate to the Scorpion songs.
I know you love their music.
I love the musical choice, but what I really loved this time was how much of a sell Caroline brought to it. Because the first time that we saw them do that new program, Michael had looked terrific in it, and she was good too, but like Michael had really just come alive. You just could tell this fit him so much better. But here, it felt like she'd found her way into the music and was feeling that vibe. I always like when you can see them singing on ice when they're like, they're belting along with the song as they're moving. You can tell that they're in it and they feel it. And this time I just felt like she had settled into that program in a way that was really impressive and really fun. And so I loved it. That stands out to me more than their free skate. But I think that, score-wise, it might not have been where they wanted to be, but they still landed that bronze. So they're still on the podium. Yeah. And they still beat out two other American teams here. So I think it's a good showing for them.
It is. And it's worth noting that like they're ahead of Peyton Bai, who came in fourth. And Peyton Bai, I always feel like, are a really nice team. They're fun to watch. They're very good. It's nothing against them, but I haven't felt that it factor from them ever. Again, I hope they prove me wrong. I'd always love to be surprised in that regard, but it'll be an interesting U.S. Nationals looking at all of this.
Right, absolutely. The rest of the podium, the rest of the lineup, it's not all that exciting to talk about in ice dance here, so I think we should just move right along to the men.
The showdown between Shoma, the short king, and Adam Siao Him Fa.
As the signs were going up in Skate France last week. Yes. Adam Siao Him Fa, which is fantastic. This competition, the real story was the return of Shoma Uno, who we have not yet seen until this competition competing yet this season. The only thing we had seen him was the Japan Open, where he skated in the gala.
Exactly.
He didn't compete. He just did a gala performance. It was the first preview of his long program there. But of course, he is the two-time world champion and also an Olympic medalist. And
two-time.
Yes. So Shoma is the veteran. He is the most dominant skater of all of the years post Nathan Chen and Yuzuru Hanyu.
And if we're being honest, he's just the best all-around skater on the men's side going right now.
Yes.
Like if you're just looking at every aspect, it's Shoma.
But the big competition at this one, everybody was waiting to see the head-to-head was him versus Adam Siao Him Fa, because Adam, one, has looked fantastic this season.
He's undefeated.
He's undefeated after 6 competitions.
Yeah. Including this one, yes.
Right. He won 3 challenger events, 1 kind of standalone event, and then 2 Grand Prix.
Yeah.
So that is dominant so far this season. There's a good reason for it. It's because he's kicking ass out there.
He is so conditioned, so good. I mean, he's been so good. And I know we were just talking about this last week, but yet again, he shows up here, had a little mess up. And I say little, he fell on his triple axel. I guess that's not little, in his short program, but still scored over 90 because it was still spectacular. And then had some scratchy landings in his long, but dominated, just outrageously good.
The thing that was really interesting at this one was that Shoma won the short program.
Yes. With a killer short program that's just interesting and fluid, I guess is the word I would use. Like there's something sinewy about it.
The thing that we were hearing in the commentary for it was that Shoma's programs this year are sort of a reflection on all of the accomplishments that he has had over his long career, and that he is in general not really all that. You guys aren't seeing Wen's face, but she's making the sad pouty face, because the other thing he was saying is that Shoma is not really focused on scores this year. He's focused on performance. He wants to give the best possible magnetic, beautiful performances on ice for every audience. And he doesn't really care where it shakes out when it comes to the podium.
And that's not what's making me sad. It's that it's all these reflections. It feels like a farewell. Both programs with his storytelling feel like him saying like, and I'm done with competitive skating. And
right. Which
that's why I'm sad and pouty.
Which on one level you could say, but we're so close to the Olympics and you are the favorite of the men right now. You could go and get your third medal and make it gold this time. But it kind of feels like Shoma is hitting the end of what he wants to do competitively, and that he just wants to continue on as an artist. And the artistry on display is spectacular, and it's just what you'd expect from him.
Oh my God, yeah. And like he had 2 mistakes in his long program. Like he fell on his quad loop and doubled his quad flip, I believe, his first 2 jumps. And then everything from there, it's like he got it out of his system, and then it was beautiful. And I don't know, it's the Shoma landings with his like deep knee bends. It's his edge work. It's his flow, his spins, the surprising moments that he brings that just delight you. I'm hoping that this is just a moment and he keeps going. But I also want Shoma to bring all of his artistry because it is so desperately needed in skating. So I have very mixed emotions about it because I'm so happy to have seen him here. I think silver, he seemed really happy at this competition. So I don't think he cared where he landed at all. Like based on his own comments, like the score wasn't really that relevant to him. And he still took silver. I don't know. I'm torn. I'm happy for him and also sad for me.
You can make the argument that if he had skated clean in the free skate that he might have won. And I haven't crunched the numbers on that to see how that would have shaken out if you just remove, the downgrades and stuff. But Adam Siao Him Fa, even though it wasn't the perfection that it was at Skate France, he scored higher.
Yeah.
At a competition that was so mid in its scoring and the way that the judges were rewarding things, they gave Adam all the points.
It's just showing his consistency, his strength. I think it was Mark, the commentator for ISU, who mentioned it. There's something actually even more impressive about him performing the way he did here than at Grand Prix of France. He was jet lagged. He was only a few days out of a huge competition, got on a 15, 20-hour flight, something like that, to get to China and train again and compete again that fast and do it as extraordinarily well as he did. He made one mistake in all the programs that he did for the past 8 days and won 2 competitions. It's astounding and really, really makes him the favorite going into the Grand Prix final.
Yeah, I mean, we've been so excited to see the realization of his talent this season. He's been great for years. He just lacked a little bit of consistency.
He was just sort of wild.
Yeah, but this season, his storytelling's on point. His athleticism is incredible. He does things out there that, like, just every time he throws that Arabian,
oh my God,
it's unreal. Like, it makes the crowd go nuts because it's just such an incredible bit of acrobatic ability in such high speed and complicated footwork. It's beautiful choreography, beautiful storytelling. It's so fun to see his coaches go crazy. Because one of his coaches is Benoit, and Benoit, I don't even know the rest of his name. I don't know if that's his first name or his last name. He's a mononym. He's just Benoit. And Benoit looks like he's like the main boss at the end of like a John Wick film or something. Like he looks like he's traveling internationally to actually assassinate people along with Coach Skating. And he never looks like he cracks emotionally. And yet he's in the back in the kiss and cry, like throwing high fives and grinning ear to ear. And because they just know that like they're seeing all this work they invested into Adam and all the work that Adam put in come to fruition.
Absolutely.
And it's beautiful.
It's paying off. But I want to also talk about Mikhail Shadorov, who came in third from Kazakhstan. We saw him at Skate Canada. He skated really well there and was not rewarded.
He was robbed at Skate Canada.
He was.
Let's be honest.
And then he comes here. And I mean, let's put a point on it. He doesn't really have the skating skills in terms of his components by any stretch. He's still very, very young. But the guy can jump and he can be dramatic. I will give him a lot of credit for bringing a lot of his own charisma out there. And coming in third here, he did it well. I was very impressed.
He can deliver a highly technical program clean. And so many of the men this season cannot do that. There's still a lot of room for him to develop in his artistry and to give something that is more refined and more mature. But when we watched him at Skate Canada, he was underscored in both of his performances. The audience knew it. And, that's the one place where like they were just giving out points all over the place. But for him, it just felt like the judges were like, well, yeah, you did the work, but we just not real interested in giving you this thing. So when he came here, it was really gratifying to see him get scored more appropriately. It was kind of funny that after the short program, that even though his score was really solid, he and his coach,
Alexei Urmanov, Olympic gold medalist.
Yeah, they were very stone-faced. Like They just took it real,
There weren't no feelings.
No, and I just got the impression that after Canada, that they were like, just don't expect too much here because, there are other bigger names and they're just, the expectation is that you're just not going to get rewarded no matter what you do. That's what I read off of them. I don't know if that's actually the case, but they had something to smile about whenever he got done in the free skate because it had landed him definitely on the podium. He ended up getting bronze, which is a big deal for a guy at this stage of his career. And also the first male skater from Kazakhstan to land on a Grand Prix podium.
Since Dennis 10, the late Dennis 10.
Yeah. So, which was how long ago?
2010, something like that.
Yeah. So it's been a little while. Yeah. So I was really happy to see him actually get the podium here. I thought he deserved it. Is he in the echelon of the top two skaters? I mean, not even remotely.
And is he in the echelon of a lot of the skaters that he beat if they're on?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at some of the other skaters who were here, I mean, you have Kazuki Tomono from Japan, who is always
an astoundingly good skater who's just not consistent.
Yeah, he's just not had the jumps yet this season for whatever reason. He's an incredible performer, but he's not been putting it together. You also had Japan's Sota Yamamoto, who just won like 2 weeks ago. He won Skate Canada and, is a great competitor out of Japan. He is a little inconsistent as well. He does not quite have the artistry, but his pop and his jumps and the charisma in his performance takes him a long way. But
not here.
Not here. It just fell apart for him in this one. And so he ended up in 8th in the short program, fought his way back to 5th,
but still dropped himself right out of any chance at the Grand Prix final.
Right. And then you also had Bo Yangjin from China, who was like the total rock star of this event.
It was amazing. It felt like Yuzuru Hanyu days in the sense of watching it rain stuffies from the audience just forever. The poor little girls who had to like go out onto the ice and pick up after Bo Yangjin. Oh my God.
It was crazy. Also, this event was really strange because it's a huge auditorium or a huge arena.
Yeah.
The way that it's set up, the audience is actually really far back and up.
Yeah,
so
like 12, 14, maybe more feet up.
Yeah, like
it was just bizarre.
Really far away. And it meant that when they were trying to throw stuff onto the ice, a lot of them couldn't get there. And so it was either falling into the area around the rink or it was landing on the judges. So sometimes whenever Bo Yang would get done, you would get a shot of the judges and they're literally putting their hands over their heads trying to like shield themselves from stuffies like landing on them. And yeah, it looked like the Yuzuru Hanyu days when he used to just it was just Pooh Bears like by the thousands raining in there.
Pooh rain.
Yeah, it was a terrible, terrible phrase, Pooh rain. Chocolate rain. There's a throwback for the internet crowd. But yeah, Bo Yang, he landed in 7th here, and he had a really nice short program. Actually, he was in 4th after the short, and he looked good. But
yeah, overall, I mean, I feel like the top 3 were the top 3 again, where it's like the right people ended up on the podium, and overall, it was amazing to see Shoma. I feel like this was his his start. It's the slow warm up, and he still landed with one of the top scores of the season. I think he's still like the third highest score of the season so far amongst the men. So I'm not worried about where Shoma's going to land this season. And I really didn't get the impression he was. It was just really lovely to see him. And man, am I thrilled to see more Adam Siao Him Fa.
Yeah. For Adam now, he's basically just got to wait for the next couple of weeks to...
He gets to go home and train for a few weeks and actually get some rest and then be ready to go back to China and go back to Beijing for the final.
It's going to be an exciting showdown whenever that happens. And then rounding everything out, when we get to the pairs, I mean, I think that the obvious story is just that this was the second Grand Prix appearance of Stellato-Dudek and Deschamps from Canada. We talked about them from Skate Canada, where they had a triumphant win there. They took the gold here again, too. No surprise. I don't think they performed quite up to Deanna's...
either of their standards, but especially
for sure.
Deanna's. Yeah.
I only say it that way because, like, Maxime Deschamps, he's just good vibes, right? Like, Maxime, like, when things go wrong, he kind of laughs it off. He's ready to be chill and the kiss and cry. He's just a level dude. Deanna, you can tell, holds herself to the highest possible standard.
Yes.
And when things are not perfect, she does not have a poker face to hide that. But regardless of the fact that they did have a few little mistakes here and there, both in the short and the long, you know, they still won by 10 points over the Italian team.
Yeah. To be fair to them too, and I know we keep talking about scores compared, you know, to other competitions, this score still would have beaten anybody else this season. So even when they win sort of because they're just the class of the field and it's obvious, even though they have mistakes in the short and the long, they're still so good. They're given the grace. Granted, when and if we see the return of Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara and they're back to full health and have a new short program, that table could turn real fast. So I also very much get the impression from Deanna and Maxime, they are trying to make sure that they are the top, not only just by the numbers, but in general perceived by the judges as the best right now, so that whenever our world champions from Japan come back, it's a much tighter race and it's not just the automatic, oh, well, now the world champions are back. It's like, no, but Deanna and Maxime want that Grand Prix final real bad. And it's theirs to have if they can sustain.
Yeah. And last season, they got bumped off the podium at Worlds by the Italian team. And the Italian team this season has just not looked as strong.
Not yet.
And we've only seen them a couple of times, but that they have not been at full firepower yet. And Stellato-Dudek and Deschamps have very much made the statement from the beginning of the season on that they are here to take your gold. Like you said, if the Japanese team comes back at full health, I mean, they are a very, very formidable team. And, you know, they're one of my absolute favorites, and I can't wait to see them. But they were not looking great in challengers. And with injury, they have been taken out of the Grand Prix. So I don't know when we get to see them again.
I'm assuming we'll get to see them at Japanese Nationals as long as Ryuichi's injury is in good shape. And that will ideally give us a better idea of what they're looking at going into next season. But March is still pretty far away for the Worlds. They're the reigning world champions. I have faith that they're going to come back strong. I believe in them.
And I would hope that maybe we would get to see them at like 4 continents or something.
That would be amazing. They could really use that as a nice international stepping stone towards Worlds. They need it.
Yeah. Or the only other thing from the Paris competition that kind of surprised me was seeing Germany's Hakan Kunkel land off the podium in 4th.
I mean, they performed to 4th level. I mean, they didn't have their best skates. And in the post interviews I saw, it sounded like there was stuff on and off the ice that they were struggling with. No further description provided. I mostly just hope that they can hang on to their Grand Prix final placement because they won another Grand Prix. So it's possible that they'll stay there, especially with the pairs just being kind of all over the place this season. They've still got a shot. I think it's also still worth mentioning Cheng Peng and Li Wang for China, who came in 3rd here, because Cheng Peng has been on the scene before, has been great. I don't know that I loved this material, but they're a fairly new team from what I understand. And coming in 3rd at their Grand Prix debut is pretty wonderful. So I'm curious, mostly just to kind of see where they go. I mean, there's such a long history of amazing Chinese pair teams that it was sort of a lovely thing to see again. Like, I'm waiting to kind of see how they evolve.
I mean, the thing that really struck me about watching all of the Chinese teams was just the crazy height on their thrown triples.
Mm-hmm.
It was unreal how much height and pop they got out of those. They didn't really make a massive impression on me otherwise, but that was something that stood out to me. But unfortunately, the rest of the pairs just really didn't leave a strong memory for me after the fact. And maybe it's because we're recording this just one day after seeing all of it. But I
mean, I got to be honest, this overall competition in general, and maybe it is just the Grand Prix week over week fatigue. Like, I am a skating obsessive. I'm aware of this. And yet even at week 4, it's like the slushy middle. Everybody's a little tired, and so am I. I'm looking forward to Espoo in Finland next week because there's a few people there we haven't seen yet. But also, I'm just curious to kind of get closer and closer towards that Grand Prix final. Like, I think that I'm even ready for it already. I'm like, okay, we're warmed up. Let's get it going.
Well, and we watched a whole lot of the Challenger series.
We did.
And now we've been watching every week of Grand Prix. And so basically we've had skating every week, which has been fantastic.
It has.
But I think the challenge that happens is that when you have the lower tier, more mediocre performances,
you start skipping some.
Right. You start hitting that point where, especially if you're not watching it in real time,
yes.
You know, when you're watching it after the fact and you've already seen the scores, you know, like you're waking up and checking social media and boom, then, you know, Jackie Wong's already posted the whole outline of what's happened.
Which, thank you, Jackie.
Right.
Every day.
It's great. But it also means that when you're sitting down to pull up Peacock and bring those things up, that you're just looking at like, oh, okay, you know, Lucas Broussard's going to drop into last place. I don't need to watch that performance because...
Which sucks for Lucas Broussard. Like,
right.
And it's maybe it's not a great skate, but I still should give him a watch just to see what he's doing and how good or not good it was, just to kind of get an idea. But it's really hard week over week. Like you said, you only have so much time and you focus on what, as you kind of sort out throughout this season, who the ones you want to see are.
Right. And I think this is the challenge for the casual skating fan when you're watching events. If you have Peacock to watch it, or if you're watching it on the ISU
if you can
app.
Find it. Yes.
Right. If you can find it, if you don't have to VPN into it or whatever it is to see it, is that like if you're not watching it in real time, then you're fitting it in somewhere else into your day. And sometimes that might mean watching 4 competitions in an evening.
Yeah.
Which means you got to compress that a little bit, which at least watching it after, you know, in replay means you can skip through the little commentary pits.
I don't need the replays.
Right. Oh, you know, the replays and you know, and skip through introductions and all that kind of stuff just to, you know, especially at this point in the season, you've seen it all a lot.
I have heard Mark say, "What a shame."
Yeah.
1,000 times.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, there's just certain points where you're like, you know what? I only have so much time in the day. I'm going to skip to the good stuff. And with no shade to those other people, we were definitely watching like all of it early on, and now it's just a little tougher.
It is.
So as we get, we hit the end game of the season and hit the bigger competitions, it's going to be much more of you're watching everything because every moment matters. But right now, there are some places where it just doesn't feel like the non-competitive elements are as much worth the time to watch.
I agree. Well, with that, looking forward, next week we have Espoo, the Finland. Unfortunately, Junwon Cha has withdrawn. I say unfortunately in the sense that it's a bummer, but also 2 weeks ago at Skate Canada, I was like, please, Junwon, don't go to Finland, because he looked so rough that I was just thinking he needed to reset. So I manifested this. That's what I'm saying.
Junwon had such a terrible skate there. By turns kind of frightening and kind of cringy and kind of embarrassing and just horribly disappointing. As a fan of his work on the ice, that was just really hard to watch. I think that it is a good choice to pull him out of that competition and just figure out what they can do to rework everything that's going on right now, figure out how to fix his conditioning, how to get his jumps back, because the guy has the best quad sal in the
so beautiful.
in the business, and
he's just an extraordinary skater.
Yeah, but he completely had a disaster skate and just fell on that quad sal, and everything collapsed afterwards. And so it's sad to not have him there, but maybe that means somebody else will be called up to fill the space. I'm not sure if they've announced any kind of replacement or if they're just going to run without it.
I think they're just going to run without it based on what I read, but regardless, I think it'll still be a fun competition. And I'm just most curious to see, apart from the men's competition, this is our second viewing of both Kaori Sakamoto's programs and Chakan Bates's. So I'm very, very curious to see the both of them, because I absolutely adored Chakan Bates's, rhythm dance and long program this season at Skate America. They're incredible. So I'm really curious to see how they've, evolved since then, because they've had a little bit more downtime. And Kaori was so good at Skate Canada. I'm hoping she can bring the same level here. I mean, it's going to be tough to match it. It was so extraordinary, but it's exciting.
Yeah, still a lot to look forward to with that. And then the week after that is NHK in Japan. And then there's a week off. And then we'll go into the Grand Prix Final, which you said is back in Beijing. So there's a lot of Grand Prix still left ahead of us.
Oh my, yes.
so much to keep up with. I'm certainly at a point where like my brain is starting to stall out on names and scores and placements kind of and trying to figure out.
Yes.
It is a lot, especially when you don't have a numbers brain, and I most certainly do not. But one way or another, I mean, I thought Cup of China, if you looked at just the kind of the top spots, maybe the top 5 of every competition, minus like maybe pairs, that's maybe like top 2. You had some really nice stuff. A lot of the rest of it was like pretty mid, but then again, that's been kind of the Grand Prix season in general. Like there's a lot of like junior competitors in here that are just kind of coming up. There's also a lot of people like, say, like a Jimmy Ma, who are kind of, still in the sport, and wonderfully so, but still not competitive. Because I mean, he's positively geriatric at like 28. And I say geriatric, the dude can move, right? Like he's
so much fun. And his short program was dynamite in terms of its entertainment value.
Oh, and so good at the gala too. Like he was great at the gala, and skates to K-pop, which just makes me happy. But
yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. We're not only in the mushy middle of the Grand Prix, we're in the mushy middle of the quadrennial, like going in from last Olympics into this one. Like year 2 of 4 into the Olympic Games is always people sorting themselves out. Who's going to rise up? There's always going to be that young skater who pops in at the end going, "Hello, I'm Isabel Levito, and I'm going here to mess with your placements." And, or Ilya Melin. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But there's definitely that middle droop where you're like, people are just sort of figuring out what works for them and what doesn't. So I think we're seeing that for sure. And I'm here for it. It's interesting. And I feel like this season's already showing a lot of progress for a lot of these skaters that, last season they were showing promise. Now they're showing progress.
Yeah. And what I always hope for too is that it is not just a game of favorites, where it's like, okay, here are the 10 best across disciplines and they just do the best. I love it when you get surprises like Hana Yoshida or Ryan Sumiyoshi, these people who are coming up out of nowhere and grabbing medals and beating out the people who you would have expected to top podiums and stuff.
This is when it's their time to rise.
Right. Yeah. So I'm here for all of that. But that'll wrap up our coverage of the Cup of China. Like you said, Espoo from Finland.
Next week.
So we'll be back to talk about all of that. Then in the meantime, keep up with all things Scoreography at our website, scoreography.show. There you can find the links to all the places where you can subscribe to the podcast, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We're also on YouTube, and we're on all of the other places as well, all the expected podcasting platforms. You can follow us on Threads as @Scoreography, Instagram as @Scoreography, on Blue Sky as @Scoreography.show. And we're still on the bad place, but we're not really doing much with it. But you can find us there too if you need to.
But message us. Tell us what you want us to talk about. Ask us questions, because that'll actually prompt us to do something on social media. We're not that fabulous at it.
You're not great right now with it. Yeah, there's a lot to keep up with, and we're working our way towards that. But if you got all the way to here, and let's say you're listening to this on YouTube, hit like and subscribe, because that's what people always tell you to do, right? And if you're on any platform that allows you to leave comments of any kind, drop us a comment and tell us what your favorite performance was at this competition, or tell us the biggest upset, the biggest surprise, the thing that really shook your world in watching the Cup of China. But otherwise, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. All that helps us out in growing the show, and also just to know what you like to hear from our program. And for Scoreography, I'm Adrian Buskey.
And I'm Wendy Buskey.
And we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.